Big news. Your soulmate is overwhelmed with happiness right now because you finally did the one thing they were waiting for. My beloved child. Something changed inside your soulmate today, and the emotion hit them so suddenly that they could barely contain it. They had been waiting for one particular sign from you, not something expensive, dramatic, or obvious, but something that would finally answer the question they had been carrying quietly for far too long. And somehow, without realizing how deeply it would affect them, you gave them exactly what they needed. The moment they recognized it, their entire mood shifted. They replayed what happened in their mind, almost afraid to believe it meant what they hoped it meant. Then came the smile they couldn't hide. The relief. The overwhelming happiness. But here is where this becomes interesting. What you did wasn't important because of the action itself. It was important because of what your soulmate believes that action revealed about your heart. And once you understand what they saw in you, you'll understand why this moment has changed everything. For a long time, your soulmate had been watching for consistency. They wanted to know whether the connection they felt was something you truly valued or something they had imagined because their own feelings were so strong. There were moments when they nearly convinced themselves to stop hoping. They questioned the silence, analyzed little details, and wondered whether they should protect their heart before it became even more attached. But beneath those doubts was one private wish. They wanted you to show, in your own natural way, that you weren't emotionally walking away. And then you finally did it. Maybe you chose honesty when it would have been easier to remain guarded. Maybe you showed patience instead of disappearing. Maybe you allowed your true feelings to become visible through one simple decision. Whatever form it took, your soulmate recognized something unmistakable: effort. Real effort. And that was the one thing they had secretly been waiting to see. Don't skip, because their reaction wasn't merely happiness. That moment caused them to make a decision about you that they hadn't been ready to make before. Right now, your soulmate is seeing the connection differently. That small but meaningful thing you did removed a fear they had never openly admitted. Suddenly, they're imagining possibilities they previously refused to consider because they didn't want to get ahead of themselves. They're thinking about conversations they want to have with you. Words they held back. Feelings they carefully kept under control. And there is one particular truth they've wanted to tell you, but until now, they weren't convinced the timing was right. Ask yourself this. Why would one simple action from you create such a powerful emotional response unless they had already invested far more of their heart than you realized? Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate's happiness is only the beginning of what changed today. After recognizing what your action truly meant, they quietly decided they no longer wanted to keep doing what they had been doing. And the next choice they are considering could finally reveal just how long they have been waiting for you. That decision came from a realization your soulmate could no longer ignore. For weeks, perhaps longer, they had been holding themselves back because they were afraid of moving toward you without knowing whether you would meet them halfway. They kept certain words unspoken. They imagined reaching out, then reconsidered. They wanted to show you how deeply they cared, but something inside them kept whispering, "Wait until you know." Now they feel like they finally know. What you did gave them the reassurance they had been searching for, and suddenly the walls they carefully built around their feelings don't seem necessary anymore. But there is another detail they haven't told you. Shortly after recognizing your effort, they remembered a specific moment between you, one they originally misunderstood. Looking back at it now, they see it completely differently, and that realization brought an unexpected rush of emotion. Your soulmate once believed that particular moment was proof you didn't feel as strongly as they did. Maybe your response seemed too quiet. Maybe your timing confused them. Maybe circumstances created distance when they desperately wanted closeness. Whatever happened, they carried that memory longer than you would imagine. But your recent action connected the missing pieces. Suddenly, what once looked like indifference began to look like caution. What seemed like distance started making sense as hesitation. And instead of feeling rejected, your soulmate began wondering whether you had been protecting your feelings just as carefully as they were protecting theirs. Can you imagine what that realization did to them? Happiness mixed with relief, followed by one powerful question. Have we both been waiting for each other this entire time? Stay with this, because that question pushed your soulmate towards something they had repeatedly promised themselves they wouldn't do until they felt completely certain. They started thinking about taking the emotional risk first. Not with some enormous dramatic gesture, but with something unmistakable enough that you would understand their intention. They don't want another misunderstanding stealing time from this connection. They don't want fear deciding what happens next. And most importantly, they no longer want you wondering whether your effort mattered, because it mattered more than you currently know. Your soulmate has already begun considering exactly what they could say or do to show you that your signal was received. Yet there's one reason they're hesitating before making that move, and it has nothing to do with doubting you anymore. Something else happened after their happiness settled in. Something involving a conversation they never expected to have. During that conversation, another person noticed the sudden change in your soulmate's behavior and asked one simple question. Your soulmate's answer revealed far more than they intended, and what they admitted about you may be the clearest sign yet of what is coming next. The question caught your soulmate completely off guard because it was asked at the exact moment they were trying to hide that unmistakable smile. Someone close to them noticed the difference immediately and said, "What happened to you today?" Your soulmate tried to brush it aside at first. They changed the subject, looked away, and pretended nothing unusual had happened. But their happiness had already given them away. Finally, they admitted that something you did had made them realize they may have been worrying for no reason. They didn't reveal every private detail, but they said enough for the other person to understand that you were responsible for this sudden change. Then came another question, "So what are you going to do about it?" Your soulmate went quiet. Not because they didn't have an answer, but because they already had one, and saying it aloud would make the decision feel real. That silence lasted only a few seconds, yet something powerful happened inside them during it. Your soulmate realized they were tired of allowing uncertainty to control a connection that meant this much. They remembered all the times they wanted to move closer but stopped themselves. They remembered wondering whether you noticed their feelings, whether you understood their subtle signals, and whether you were waiting for reassurance too. Your recent action answered enough of those doubts that hiding now feels harder than speaking. So your soulmate finally admitted something they hadn't even fully admitted to themselves. They want you to know how important you have become to them. Not through confusing hints. Not through another half-finished conversation. They want to make it clearer. And the person listening immediately noticed something your soulmate hadn't realized, the way their entire expression changed whenever they spoke about you. But then that person asked one more question, and it struck directly at the fear your soulmate still hadn't conquered. What if they feel the same way and they're waiting for you now? That possibility stayed with your soulmate long after the conversation ended. Suddenly, waiting didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like another opportunity for misunderstanding. And this is why their happiness right now carries something deeper beneath it: determination. The one thing you finally did gave them permission, emotionally, to consider doing the one thing they had been afraid to do themselves. Don't skip, because they're no longer wondering whether they should acknowledge what exists between you. They're thinking about how to do it without leaving room for confusion. They have even begun forming certain words in their mind, imagining your reaction and changing them again because they want this moment to feel genuine. But before they make that move, your soulmate has decided to look for one final confirmation from you. And what they're watching for now is something so subtle that you may already be giving it without realizing it. That final confirmation has nothing to do with a grand gesture. Your soulmate is watching for something far more personal: whether the warmth you showed remains when there is no pressure, no perfect moment, and no reason to impress anyone. They want to see whether you continue showing up with the same sincerity that made them so happy in the first place. And something surprising has already happened. They noticed another small detail from you that matched the first one almost perfectly. It made them stop and think, this wasn't accidental. Suddenly, the possibility that you genuinely understand what they need feels much more real. Their excitement grew, but so did their nervousness, because now they have fewer reasons to hide behind uncertainty. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone finally receives the reassurance they've secretly wanted for so long? Sometimes happiness doesn't make them relax. Sometimes it gives them courage. And that courage is beginning to change your soulmate's behavior. They're becoming less interested in pretending that you don't affect them. Something that once would have remained hidden is slowly becoming visible: the extra attention they give your words, the way they remember details about you, the instinct to wonder how you're feeling before thinking about themselves. Your action didn't create these feelings. It exposed how strong they already were. That distinction matters, because your soulmate is now realizing they weren't waiting for you to become someone different. They were waiting for evidence that the person they already cared about was willing to meet them emotionally. You finally gave them that evidence. Stay till the end, because this is where another hidden truth begins surfacing. Your soulmate had actually prepared themselves for the opposite outcome. They had quietly decided what they would do if that reassurance never came, and your timing interrupted that decision at the last possible moment. They were beginning to convince themselves that stepping back might be the only way to protect what was left of their hope. Not because their feelings disappeared, but because continuing without clarity was becoming emotionally exhausting. Then you did the one thing they had been waiting for. Imagine the relief of believing a door is about to close, only to realize someone meaningful is standing on the other side, quietly holding it open. That's why their happiness feels so intense right now. You didn't simply make them smile. You changed the direction of a decision they were almost ready to make. And now your soulmate is considering something entirely different. Instead of stepping back, they may finally step closer. But there is one detail you still don't know. Before changing their mind, they had written or mentally prepared certain words they never expected you to hear, and after what you did, those same words are being rewritten into something completely different. Those words were originally meant to create distance, but now your soulmate can barely recognize the emotion behind them. They had prepared themselves to say something calm, respectful, and carefully controlled, something that would protect their heart without revealing how difficult walking away would actually be. Yet after seeing what you finally did, that message no longer feels truthful. Every sentence they imagined saying suddenly sounds like something written by fear instead of love. So they began changing it in their mind. Instead of explaining why they needed distance, they started imagining how it would feel to tell you why they stayed emotionally connected for so long. And there is one sentence they keep returning to. They haven't said it yet, but every time they imagine you hearing it, their heart races because it contains the admission they've avoided from the beginning: you mattered even during the moments when they pretended you didn't. That realization is creating a different kind of happiness now. The first wave was relief. This one feels almost like freedom. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that they don't have to keep treating their feelings like something that must remain hidden. They can acknowledge that your presence affects them. They can admit that your smallest acts of sincerity mean more than impressive promises ever could. Most importantly, they can finally stop questioning whether they were foolish for hoping you would eventually show them exactly what you just showed them. But here's the detail that surprised even them: when they imagined finally opening up to you, they didn't picture themselves doing all the talking. They pictured asking you one question and then becoming completely silent while waiting for your answer. Don't skip, because that question isn't about your past. It's about what you're willing to do from this moment forward. Your soulmate wants to know whether what happened between you was the beginning of something more intentional. They don't need perfection. They aren't expecting you to suddenly have every answer. What they're searching for is the same thing your recent action already hinted at: willingness. Are you willing to keep showing up? Are you willing to let this connection become clearer instead of leaving everything trapped inside assumptions? Those questions are becoming impossible for them to ignore, and something huge is waiting for you because your soulmate has started imagining the moment when they finally stop wondering and simply ask. Yet just before they committed to doing that, another realization surfaced. They remembered one specific thing you did much earlier, something they barely understood at the time. Now, combined with what happened recently, it looks less like an isolated moment and more like the beginning of a pattern. And if your soulmate is interpreting that pattern correctly, then you may have been answering their deepest question long before either of you realized it. That earlier moment suddenly feels impossible for your soulmate to dismiss. At the time, they told themselves not to read too much into it. They noticed the extra care in your response, the way you seemed to understand what they needed without being told directly, but fear convinced them it might mean nothing. Now they're looking back with different eyes. Your recent action matches that old memory so closely that coincidence no longer feels like the easiest explanation. There is consistency here. A quiet pattern. And your soulmate is beginning to wonder whether your feelings have been appearing through your choices even when your words remained guarded. That thought has filled them with another wave of happiness because it means the moment they've been waiting for may not have arrived suddenly at all. It may have been building slowly between you. But one question is now keeping them awake inside: if these signs were there before, what else did they overlook? So they started mentally revisiting other moments between you, and one memory stood out immediately. It was a time when you could have chosen the easier response, yet you did something that protected the connection instead. Your soulmate didn't fully appreciate it then because they were too focused on what wasn't happening. Now they understand what your choice may have required from you emotionally. That realization changed something important. For the first time, they're not only thinking about how long they waited for reassurance from you. They're considering how long you may have been waiting for reassurance from them. What if both of you were protecting yourselves at exactly the same time? What if each person was searching for proof while accidentally hiding the very proof the other needed? Stay with this, because your soulmate has just recognized that waiting for another perfect sign could recreate the same silence they desperately want to escape. And that's why their next move is becoming clearer. They don't want to test you anymore. They don't want to analyze every word or turn every quiet moment into another mystery. The happiness you gave them has created something more valuable than excitement. It has given them enough confidence to become emotionally honest. They are considering approaching you with warmth instead of caution, allowing you to see that your effort reached them exactly where it mattered. But before doing that, they made one private promise to themselves: when the opportunity comes, they won't pretend your action meant less than it did. They want you to understand that you changed something inside them. And there is one particular way they're thinking about showing you. It isn't dramatic, and it isn't something anyone else needs to witness. In fact, it may happen in one surprisingly quiet moment between only the two of you. But what your soulmate is preparing to reveal in that moment could finally answer the question you've been carrying too. That quiet moment is beginning to feel more real in your soulmate's mind. They aren't imagining some perfectly rehearsed scene. They picture something simple. Just enough privacy to stop pretending, enough time to look at you without rushing, and enough courage to finally say what they've been holding back. They want to begin by acknowledging what you did. Not casually. Not with a quick thank you that hides the deeper meaning. They want you to understand that your choice reached them at the exact moment they were questioning whether they should keep hoping. And then they want to tell you something you may never have expected. They noticed your effort immediately. They felt it. They carried it with them afterward. And every time they replayed it, the same realization became stronger: you finally gave them the emotional certainty they had been waiting for. But there's another reason this conversation matters so much to them. Your soulmate doesn't only want to reveal their happiness, they want to correct an assumption they believe you may have formed about them. They suspect there were moments when their hesitation looked like a lack of interest. Times when their silence could have made you wonder whether you mattered. Looking back, they regret allowing fear to speak for them. Now they want you to know that some of their quietest moments were actually the moments when they felt the most. They were simply afraid that showing too much before knowing where you stood would leave them exposed. Your recent action changed that. It made them realize you might have misunderstood their caution in exactly the same way they once misunderstood yours. And suddenly, one question feels unavoidable: how